Seasonal anime is a never-ending slog. Every 3 months, all the able-bodied animators in Japan are dragged from their homes to willingly or unwillingly grind themselves down to the bone to put out 13 episodes of anime that usually isn't worth the screen real estate it takes up. But every time, after having dug through hours of trend-chasing, bland wonder bread, you find something that just slides over you like a cup of tea on a summer afternoon. And that may be what happened with Holmes of KYOTO. I totally didn't look this up on Mal at all. This was an entirely organic find, definitely. Anyway, once I found it, all I did was put my feet up and watch that first episode. Keep in mind, this isn't an analysis video, this is just a deep dive into the first episode, how it establishes its characters, how it tells us about the world, and what I think will happen going forward. This isn't meant as an examination of the themes of the show, but just explaining the idiosyncrasies of the show, the genre, and the anime in general. That being said, here's how Domes of Makoto's first episode works. We open on a shot of Kyoto, so indicated by the shrine rising in the midground and Mount Fuji in the background, along with the pastel-colored cherry blossoms covering the bottom of the frame. Our protagonist, Mashiro Aoi, tells us that it's spring and makes a sad face when she sees a couple sitting by the river. We're shown the bag in her hand and that she's wearing a high school uniform. Nothing out of the ordinary so far. The narration tells us that she's down and headed to an antique shop. We're shown the shop in a wide shot before we cut in to show Aoi hesitating before going into the store. Once the bell is rung and she's in the store, all her nervousness disappears. We take in the mystery, the exotic nature of the items. It seems like a different world than the one we were just in with Aoi, and who better to lead her into a world of magic and enchantment than the guy who voiced angry volleyball boy Tobio Kageyama from Haikyuu. Not feeling it? Don't worry, let's keep going. With the demure welcome, Holmes instantly steals the show, and with that kind of smile, who wouldn't be swept off their feet? She was, and after a short blush, we cut to title shown in a stylistic engraved stone tablet layout. Back from the title, we see the name of the store at a dramatic angle, suggesting that this door, which looks so unassuming from the outside, holds a whole lot of world inside, an analogy for Holmes-san, which will be reinforced later. Cutting back inside the store, we see Aoi in an apron sweeping the floor, and as she's cleaning up, we're told that the first part of the episode is a recollection of her first visit to the store. Holmes-san invites Aoi to a lesson since she's done cleaning, and here we get our first glance at the titular character. So far, Holmes has been agreeable, all smiles and formal speech, but with the donning of the gloves, we can see that jolly as he may seem, he's very serious about his work, which is emphasized by Aoi pointing out that he always puts his gloves on before he handles the porcelain, an extra step that most people don't bother doing. Holmes-san pulls out a kokoratsu tea bowl, which Aoi takes a look at and comments that the art isn't very good. Rather than having her say something wrong, which Holmes-san could correct so we could see how knowledgeable he is about the bowl, she's shown as having a good sense of the art, which comes back later in the episode. We then are launched into a pottery otaku power level display with Holmes-san showing off his knowledge of antiques by mentioning the name of the wrinkles on the bottom of the bowl so we can know this dude is a serious antiques boy. Holmes remarks that Aoi is a curious student, and we're shown this when she's given the bowl to handle and she turns it upside down to get a look at the crinkled wrinkles he mentioned. Aoi then explains the nature of her lessons, what Kura is, why Holmes works here, and we're given a short conversation with his grandfather, the owner of the store, before the bell rings again and we're shown the monster of the week. Worth noting is that when the grandfather leaves the store, we don't hear the door slamming behind him, probably because he was careful to close it slowly, but once the man in the blue suit comes in, we can hear a rough door slam, an indication of his crass nature and a lack of attention to detail. If that and the music cue weren't enough to tell us that this guy is up to no good, we get the trademark spectacled villain shot with Aoi in the background to really hammer it in that this guy's bad news. Aoi hears the man mention that it's supposed to be a Kizeto tea bowl and instantly notices something is wrong with it. Again, the show is determined to tell us that Aoi is perceptive instead of having her be wrong to hit us with a smart guy moment when Holmes-san finds out what the guy is up to. Once he's told the bowl is a fake, the man instantly gets angry and Holmes goes into another display of his antiques power level, info dumping the things that make a Kizeto tea bowl and how this man's bowl doesn't fit. Important to note is that Holmes has an entirely different face from his display to Aoi, showing us that not only is Holmes aware that the bowl is fake, he also knows that it's not a coincidence that this man has brought this bowl to him. This is further reinforced by having the man sweat and tug at his necktie, showing that he knows his jig is up, and also setting up the discomfort to allow Holmes to make the comments he will make about this tie later on. Where Holmes is shown as angry, the shot we get of Aoi is much more sympathetic. She doesn't seem to be aware that the man is attempting to defraud the antique store and thinks that he just didn't know the bowl was a fake. From this split, we can tell that not only is Holmes knowledgeable about the antiques in the store, he's also wise enough to know that this man is up to no good. Holmes is set up here as having the capacity to think in a criminal way, which Aoi hasn't yet worked up to, and which is reinforced by Holmes calling himself wicked later in the episode. Aoi's ignorance is broken when Holmes accuses the man of bringing in a counterfeit, and when the man says that Holmes is too young to know what he's talking about, which we later learn was the entire point of the man bringing the bowl to the store, Holmes has the man's entire plan figured out. The next scene has Holmes displaying his power level again, but important to note is that instead of a series of ass pulls that the audience couldn't have put together even if they wanted to, he addresses visible and broadcast tells that the man himself revealed. Holmes notices the man's suit and shoes, which were shown as well, and then he mentioned he was from Osaka, but he's in Kyoto to appraise an antique. With these facts, Holmes speculates that the man knew of him by reputation for being young and waited till his father left so he could try and slip his counterfeit by an inexperienced appraiser. The scammer picks up his wares and leaves once he's confronted. Interesting to note is that for all the scenes where the scammer is in, we see these off-ankle shots to introduce some unease to the scenario and show us again that this guy is not right. Subtlety, this is not. After the scammer is ousted, we get a little moment between Aoi and Holmes when he asks her to cast salt out the door to ward off the evil spirits, and all she has is boiled egg seasoning. This gives us an excuse to see the two main characters bonding over some eggs which are drawn to look juicy as all hell, and we get back to establishing the duo's chemistry. Holmes goes on to say that he usually gets upset for a whole day when a counterfeiter comes in, and that Aoi holding the salt got his mind off of it. This is the first time the dynamic between the two is explained. Although it's something we could have learned from the title, Holmes is usually portrayed as an intense, obsessive genius, with his sidekick Watson, or in our case Aoi, being the one who keeps him manageable. Aoi's wet behind the earsness allows the show to throw in exposition about how counterfeits work as well, and tells us that obviously Holmes as an antique store operator can't stand them. Again, subtlety is not the show's best aspect. Holmes-san goes on to say that anyone who would defile art this way is committing blasphemy, showing us that it's not his father's business he cares about, but the integrity of the art itself, which is compromised when an inferior product is passed off as the original. A guy who cares about art. How romantic, am I right? Aoi tries to call him out on his moral virtue, to which Holmes protests, saying he's actually a wicked guy. Sure you are, buddy, sure you are. I mean, remember guys, this is based on a novel, so the boy toad can't be 100% pure, or we'd need a bad boy to keep things spicy. So giving Holmes a dark side cuts out a whole one character. This cognitive dissonance triggers another flashback for Aoi, and with another wide shot of Kyoto with green leaves turning back to cherry blossoms along with an unnecessary 2 weeks earlier text line, we go back to the start of the episode with high school uniform wearing Aoi holding a bag in her hand, and as an audience now armed with the knowledge of the person she has to deal with inside the store. The Aoi we see on her first day in the store is entirely different from the capable, perceptive girl we see sweeping the floor. She's clearly nervous and holds the bag so close to her chest that we as the audience can see clearly what Holmes is about to tell us. To make Aoi at home and give her that kimochi first impression of our handsome storekeeper, we see another customer coming with an antique to appraise. In stark contrast to the interaction from before, we see Holmes' love for the art come through as he looks at a painting of a scene in nature called Mount Fuji and cherry blossoms. Remember the first shot of the episode? Okay, so Kyoto. Even though the painting is fake, the interaction goes entirely the opposite way, telling us that even though the art is not original, the sincerity of the customers means Holmes isn't the bitter, angry guy he was with the counterfeiter early in the episode. Aoi is shown as being disappointed to this appraisal and somehow weirdly more shiny than she is when she's working at the store, maybe to emphasize her schoolgirl appeal and sell those figurines. This shot in particular is guilty of what I'd call a shitty attempt at euphonium-esque schoolgirl charm. Weirdly, we're shown a weird angle shot again, even though there's no real conflict in the scene and Holmes has already told the customers that their painting is fake. Aoi then goes on a soliloquy about how her crush on Holmes is justified with a look at the careful decoration of the store, telling us again that Holmes is the typical Sherlock in everything but profession. Subtlety is a dead art. After a jump scare from a creepy doll, Aoi settles on looking at a particular bowl and catches Holmes' eye, who comes over and explains how valuable the bowl she's actually looking at is. Aoi has a good eye, we get it. Move on, please. In the usual Japanese way of deflecting allusions to anything else, Holmes gives us a stilted explanation of how his nickname is just a shortening of his name, Kiyotaka Yagashira, and has nothing to do with Sherlock Holmes or anything else. We're given another power level display when he rattles off the facts of Aoi's situation, which even though it's accessible enough that the audience could have deduced the same, is starting to get repetitive. This is the third such scene in the first 10 minutes of the show, the ass pull of how long she's been in the town aside. After Aoi asks how he knows, and he tells her so we can get a nice payoff for if we guessed how he knew correctly, Holmes goes back into that angry mode when he starts to think that she stole the antique she wants appraised from her house. So far we know Holmes is real smart, which is told to us again when it's mentioned that he's going to attend Kyoto University in the fall, one of the highest rated universities in the world, that he's a humble boy, which we then see when he plays off his attendance as just a result of a transfer. From this exchange we learn that Holmes has more going on than we're told, and even though he values the standing that having Kyoto University on his resume gives him, he doesn't want it to come off as something that is an indication of his genius status. The show then sets up a gag that I'm going to assume will run for the length of the show, with Holmes reading Aoi's mind to comedic effect. This isn't a particularly original gag, and I'm assuming this will lead to some romantic tension later on in the show, with maybe a poignant moment that ends in a kiss under some fireworks, but that's an aspel on my part, so let's keep going. The second gag of the show follows where Holmes makes a guess about something he has no right knowing about, and which I suspect will end up being repeated throughout the show. The Holmes aesthetic doesn't lend itself to all that many comedic aspects, but esoteric guesses and near magical mind reading are two of the only acceptable ones. Holmes bursts Aoi's bubble by telling her that he can't buy things from someone of her age, which prompts her to get sad, which prompts Holmes to turn on the shoujo novel protagonist nitrous charm and start a series of romantic shots, completely ignoring the other two people in the room. Side note. This frame of her looking screen right as she's being asked if she wants coffee is the ugliest frame in the episode, and there's a weird perspective shift when she turns her head to the other side that's off-putting. Anyway, back to the coffee. We're treated to another wide shot of the store as Aoi drinks the coffee, and she's still caught up in his charm beam enough to notice that he doesn't have the Kansai accent one would expect. The gag is paid off with a mind read when Holmes reveals he's Kyoto born and raised, and that it's his polite speak that doesn't reveal the accent, setting up the gag that will sign off the episode. To amp up the romantic tension which was established earlier with Holmes remarking how nice it was having Aoi around, he offhandedly mentions how he usually keeps his thoughts to himself, but something is different today. I wonder what it is. Could it be the adorable high school girl in his shop? No way, not at all. It's just a coincidence. Nothing romantic happening here, move along. With the weird-ass animated eye roll, Holmes determines the painting she brought in is genuine and puts an astronomical value on it. Aoi doesn't know anything, so we get more exposition about the nature of the artist and his history, which would be more interesting if this wasn't the third exposition of the episode, but hey, if Japanese art history is your thing, this could be a good thing. But she has 2 paintings, guys. 2, for no real reason. The purpose could have been served entirely with 1, but oh, look at this one. It's a baby. Was it worth spending 2 minutes talking about the artist so we could get this priceless reaction shot of him looking at a baby? Probably, I don't know. With the value of the antiques established, Aoi reveals the source of her paintings, her dead grandfather, and then goes on to give the lamest justification for stealing your dead grandfather's paintings I've ever heard. Remember, this is his prized antique collection, and he's dead. Deceased. And she's selling his paintings for what? Boys. Motherfucking boys. But it's no ordinary boy trouble situation. Oh no, he's dating her best friend. Her best friend, guys. When has that ever happened before? Never. It's never happened. It's completely original. At this point, if I was Holmes, I would have straight up confiscated the paintings and told her to get the fuck out, or lightly bitch slap her. Lightly. It's totally fine, it's just light bitch slap. But no, this saint of an antique stealer actually has the patience to put up with her whiny shit for long enough to actually try and teach her a lesson. At least they used the weird angle shot in a consistent way this time. In an attempt to show her the error of her teenage ways, Holmes asks her to look at the baby she brought in and tells her a story about the monk who made the painting. The story has the monk being falsely accused of fathering a child in the village, but rather than protest, he takes care of the lady's baby and finds a woman to nurse it, after which the lady admits he wasn't the father and the monk just takes it all in stride, happy that the baby has a home at least. All this to say, with the example of a monk who in his unused left nut probably has more moral virtue and depth than 1,000 years of Aoi could ever have, that she needs to get over this random dude's ass who's banging her friend now. After all, if you have a college-age 200 IQ pretty boy, who needs some random school jock? What started off as a romantic encounter is pretty much now a teacher-student thing, which I guess some people are into, and he even goes so far as to out-and-out condescend about it. With the shot of a cute baby, the lesson is learned. Aoi instantly regrets everything, becomes Buddhist, moves to the mountains, and learns how to make soy sauce. Oh wait, that doesn't happen? Oh, she gets a job. Well, that's good too, I guess. Not really the payoff I expected after that 5-minute lecture, but hey, gainful employment is better than nothing. I'm at least glad that you're ashamed of yourself, Aoi. We're all glad about that. Having accepted very reluctantly a job at a store where she does nothing under a handsome nerd boy, we cut back to the present. No text present day this time, your learning show, good job. Aoi is all shiny again now, and Holmes is back to his usual shoujo love interest self, just aloof enough to ask to be chased. As we wind down the episode, Holmes attempts to show he's wicked again and Aoi shuts him down. This could be a fun dynamic going forward, and all the setups that were established earlier in the episode are being paid off with the reason behind Aoi's good eye revealed, his grandfather warning him about a string of counterfeits making the rounds lately, and the mastermind behind the counterfeit making a small appearance. Holmes revealing his Kansai accent in a flirtatious send-off, leaving only the mystery of the Shimogamo Shrine left to be answered. I liked the show a lot more before I dove this deep into it. Seasonal anime really doesn't invite the level of scrutiny that an established, well-known series does, and shows like this are the rule these days rather than the exception to it. Even though the show is based off a series of novels and has more to draw from than most shows, it doesn't really have all that much depth to it. Given it's a shoujo romance show set in an antique store in Kyoto, so at least it has a unique setting, I'm not convinced that the Monster of the Week counterfeiter setup, along with drip-feeding us information about Holmes-san every episode, makes for a compelling watch. There are some genuine setups earlier on in the episode that get paid off at the end, and some of the visual cues are nice just because it's Kyoto and a nice departure from all the Tokyo we usually see, but having the best part of the show be the backgrounds in between scenes isn't really a good sign, and barring some interesting plot development, I don't see myself following this show. If Holmes-san is to your liking and romance series are your cup of tea, then this show might be worth checking out. If not, go watch Banana Fish or Papaya Bird or something. Subscribe.